So we are now recording. Didn't forget that, just about did. Anyway, we're on the downside here. We are continuing on digital features, the one we left off last time. We'll finish this unit here today on digital features and feedback reduction, and we're going to talk a bit about the thing called expansion today as well. And then next week we launch into, I believe it's Unit 6. I think it is. I get mixed. I think it is. It's digital noise reduction. Yeah. DNR, digital noise reduction. We'll spend a week or two on that, and then we'll talk about directional microphones, and we'll spend a week or two on that as well. When you think about digital noise reduction, and think about directional mics. D mics, DNR. D mics, DNR. Always think D mics is the head, digital noise reduction is the heart. D mics is the science, digital noise reduction is the art. They go together, they make a good team. D mics give objective improvement in speech reception. They objectively increase the signal to noise ratio because they focus in the direction in front. And they pick up, assuming that the person of interest is in front of you and the background noise is around you. Of course, if the noise is coming from in front of you, then they're not going to do any good. But anyway, so in that way, directional microphones act kind of like a funnel. But the digital noise reduction works totally different. And in any channel, if you think of my fingers as each being a channel in a hearing aid, if the digital noise reduction is working, it's going to reduce the gain in any which channel the noise is found. But of course, it's going to reduce the speech and the noise in that channel, both. So it throws the baby out with the bathwater. Now, it's comfortable. It's comforting. The listener says, hey, my listening comfort in noise is improved. Well, that's a subjective thing, which is good. That's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't objectively improve the percent of words that you understand in noise. And that is something that we always will need to underline, and we will be underlining in the next several weeks. But anyway, that's that. This is this. We've got to share screen and talk about today's thing, which will largely be, I guess, here we go. Share screen. Let's see if I can remember how to do this again. It's been a while. All right, minimize this guy, enlarge this guy here. And we talked about analog and digital circuits. And I'll pull up my notes here a second, and we'll just scroll down to where we were last week, or 2 weeks ago. So last time we talked about how, and if you look at this top paragraph here, this top paragraph is just talking about the transition from analog to digital. And when digital started in 1997, what they did was they took analog features and they put them on digital hearing aids. So digital hearing aids began, it says right here in this line, as digital imitations of their analog hearing aid forebears. Even the multi-channel and programmability of the high-end analog hearing aids were imitated. Also, today's digital hearing aids combine all sorts of compression types together into one hearing aid. We talked about that before. And we mentioned about software. Today's digital software, because every hearing aid is so complex, you need that software to get you in the ballpark. And the software puts you in the ballpark, and you can hit save, like you've entered the client's audiogram, you've chosen your hearing aid company, you've chosen your model. Automatically, the hearing aid will pick what you put into NOAA. It will take the person's audiogram. It will fit the hearing aid accordingly. You can hit save, and a lot of clinicians do just that, and then they give the person the hearing aids. Well, in a way, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy, because that's doing a frontal lobotomy. Basically, you need to do real ear measurement to prove or verify that you are getting what the software said you'd get. That's the important thing.
Idaho requires that.
Good for Idaho.
I've been going through that, and that was something I found very interesting, because I know, like, I don't think Missouri requires that, and they're
nope. A lot of jurisdictions don't.
Yeah, but they require within 6 weeks of your fitting to do a real ear measurement Or sound field measurement.
So Idaho is known for more than just its famous potatoes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good stuff. Well, good for it's the same way in the province of Ontario, Canada too. It's federal, it's provincial law. You have to. It's which is good.
I think it's good. Yeah.
A lot of clinicians, believe it or not, out there don't know how to do real ear, especially the old farts, the old people that haven't done it, and so they're kind of like they hire young people in to come in and show them how. So software today is king. And basically, too many clinicians tend to simply hit the quick fit button to adjust settings for one's hearing loss. But I think I said even last week, sometimes the software is getting hilarious. It's almost like if you have trouble hearing the preacher every second Sunday from a 45-degree angle at a distance of 33 feet, push this button. You know, it gets kind of weird sometimes. So, and the software has a lot of psychosocial type of questions on it, which I find humorous. But we covered last week the differences between analog and digital. Don't worry so much about sampling rate and quantization, but really make it your business to really internalize this particular slide here when you're looking at this. Whoops, not that guy, this one here. Analog has a microphone. There's nothing digital about the mic. A mic is simply a transducer. It changes sound waves into electricity, as you can see, acoustic into electrical. The amplifier amplifies it. Now you've got a bigger electrical current, which the receiver now, which is a backward mic, changes the electricity back into sound. That's analog. We said digital, same kind of mic, changes sound into electricity, but now you have an A to D converter. The analog electrical current is changed into numbers. The numbers are manipulated, and then you have a D to A converter. The digits are now changed back into analog electricity, and then the receiver changes that electricity into sound. So basically, you've just got that one more transduction. From instead of sound into electricity back into sound, it's sound into electricity into digits, into electricity into sound. The heart of a digital hearing aid, we said, was the DSP processor below. And really, to make sure we highlight this, I'll hit escape here and go back to our notes. And where we're talking about analog versus digital, I think I gave you the analogy last week or 2 weeks ago about a record, a needle on a record, and the needle is wiggling, and the wiggles of the needle are changed into analogous electrical current. The electrical current looks just like the wiggles on the needle. That gets amplified, and then your speaker, your woofer and tweeter, the cones on your speaker are moving analogously to the electricity. That's analog. That's where the word analog comes from. The current is analogous to the wiggles on the record, and the speaker is moving analogously to the particular electrical current. Digital divorces from that because it goes into digits, and now you've got digital signal processing, which is math, and the math all takes place at the heart of things, which is your digital signal processor right here, this guy. Okay, moving on from there, then we'll go down the page. We talked 2 weeks ago about many bands or channels, and that is really true. Remember these, it's always important to know the original first digital hearing aid had 3 channels. Then came Oticon Digifocus right afterwards in 1997, which had 7 bands composed into 2 channels. And the differences between bands and channels, quite simple. I'll show you here. Here's a whole bunch of bands and channels. Look at these guys. So you've got like buttons on an equalizer. And Oticon simply had 7 of these. And they just combined the lower frequency 3 into one channel and the higher frequency 3 or 4 into the higher frequency channel. So you had bands which were different frequency regions, and then they just composed, they would just group them into channels, okay? And then, so what Oticons did was it used Bill in the low frequency group of its bands, which it called the low frequency channel, and then it didn't use Bill in the higher frequency bands, which it called the high frequency channel. So channels in digital hearing aids are groups of bands that share a digital algorithm. Anyway, today we hardly think like that. Today it's basically, look at this. You got lots of frequency bands, and each band is going to be a channel. Because you know what the definition of channel is? It does more than just gain. There's digital noise reduction taking place in each of these bands. There's the directional microphone is working differently in each of these bands. You've got different kinds of compression taking place in each of these bands, and so it gets very, very complicated. Basically, the advantage is this. You can sculpt and shape your frequency response to get anything you want at Alice's restaurant. It's fitting flexibility. That's what you get today with all of today's digital hearing aids. We've just leaped away. The other thing we talked about 2 weeks ago was automatic feedback reduction. And we all know and must know as clinicians that feedback is caused by high frequency peaks in the output response of the hearing aid. Okay, frequency peaks. And it's high frequencies because high frequencies are short. And short sound waves are going to bounce. They don't bend, and short waves leak out of the vent of the hearing aid and get picked up by the mic. You're getting feedback. It's like me talking in a mic and going too close to the speaker, and now the speaker sound itself is entering the mic. Instead of just my voice, now my voice and the speaker sound is coming into the mic. You're getting now a vicious circle, and it's called feedback. We talked about 3 ways to reduce feedback last week. I think there was static notch filters. Then there was roving notch filters in your notes. And today we may basically use feedback. What do you call it? Phase cancellation. The hearing aid finds out what frequency is causing the feedback, and it literally produces the opposite frequency in opposite. It actually produces the same frequency in opposite phase to cancel it out. So we use feedback cancellation. Feedback is canceled because the hearing aid senses what frequencies are feeding back, okay, and then it produces frequencies, the same ones, but in opposite phase to cancel them out. Now you talk about complicated, good grief. It's quite something. It's really quite. Then we talked 2 weeks ago about the way hearing aids use compression, digital hearing aids, and we studied compression as being linear, WDRC, compression with a knee point and ratios. But I said last time too that you can also hinge things from another knee point. So that linear here, and now WDRC and more compression. And this model, or this way of hinging compression, is in a good model with the loudness growth thing that we've all looked at, okay, with decibels along the horizontal, your perceptions along the vertical, and normal being a 45-degree angle line. And in simple English, that means for normal hearing 10 to 20 decibels is soft. For normal hearing 40 to 50 is comfortable, and for normal hearing 90 to 100 is getting too loud. And for the person, when we're talking about this, for sensory neural loss, hearing aids need to amplify soft sounds by a lot and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. And this way of hinging compression is a better model to fit with that impaired loudness growth. Because with sensory neural loss, now 50 to 60 is soft, and yet 90 to 100 is too loud. So digital hearing aids simply combine both of these ways of adjusting compression. You've got a leftmost knee point, a rightmost knee point, and now you can go jiggity boo. All kinds of things can happen. You've got a knee point here, you got a knee point here. You've got linear happening below the leftmost knee point. You've got WDRC happening between the two knee points. You've got output limiting beyond the rightmost knee point. So you've got output limiting handling loud inputs, WDRC handling average inputs, and linear gain, read maximum gain, for really, really soft inputs. So you've got both things happening here. And we're going to discuss here today expansion, this little dotted line below the leftmost knee point. We'll get to that in just a bit. So basically, with today's digital hearing aids, we clinicians aren't always messing with this. We're not going in raising and lowering knee points. When we are adjusting, we are mostly looking at the frequency response of a hearing aid. I'll stop sharing just to highlight this point again. When we are adjusting hearing aids as clinicians with your client in front of you, we're mostly looking at frequency responses. We're looking at gain, output, we're looking at the channels. But if you peel off the veneer, if you go deeper in the software, what you really are adjusting when you're raising or lowering gain in any one of the channels, if you're tweaking with that, if you actually go underneath, what you're going to find out is what's being adjusted is actually your compression. This is what's happening underneath the scenes. Again, FNO, freak not out. Don't think you have to sit there doing all of this, because you're not, okay? But it's good and healthy as clinicians to know that all kinds of stuff like this is indeed taking place under the scene, under the screen in front of you. So just good to know that. So basically, if in summary here, if I were hinging things from this rightmost knee point, guess what? A greater compression ratio actually means more gain for soft sounds. Weird, but that's what it is. And if I'm hinging things, let's say, from this knee point, like we normally think of compression, yeah, then compression, you know, it means less and less and less gain here going down. This is the way we typically have looked at things. But putting it all together, basically, now today's hearing aids even have more than 2 knee points. Why have 2 when you can have 3? And what we're doing here is you're putting linear gain back into the picture again. And you're doing that especially for slightly louder than average inputs. Look at the inputs where that's happening, between 65 and 75-ish, okay? And that's important. A lot of hearing aids are doing this today, especially Oticon. Oticon has something called Speech Guard. And Speech Guard is providing linear gain for average to slightly louder than average inputs. And it's meant to address the complaint. As we said 2 weeks ago, I hear people better at 2 tables down from me than I hear the person across the table from me. And why would that happen? Because of simple WDRC. Most people are using WDRC. Most people have mild to moderate sensory neural loss. Most people have outer hair cell pathology. Therefore, the compression most people are using is the little old lady slowing down to the stop sign. Remember, low knee point, low ratio. A gradual reduction of gain as the inputs go up. Okay, fine and dandy. But that type of compression, what is it doing? It's offering most gain for soft inputs in a vain effort to imitate the outer hair cells, which it was constructed to do, because the outer hair cells amplify soft sounds, so the inner hair cells can pick them up. Well, guess what? In theory, that might be great. In reality, Mrs. McGillicuddy is frustrated, because the softer voices that are further away are amplified more, and the louder voice at the table isn't. And that's frustrating. So what people have learned is to put linear gain a little bit back in. You know who else does this? Sam's Club, Hearing Lab Technology. All the Sam's Club hearing aids, HLT. They're selling a hearing aid called ADRO, Adaptive Dynamic Range Optimization, ADRO. It's invented in Australia and used in the United States by Sam's Club. And guess what they do? They provide linear gain. They don't use compression, but it's a sliding linear gain. We'll be describing that in our last Zoom session before the final. The last, if you look at the last unit, it's on ADRO. And it's neat. It's a different alternative, but at any rate, it's kind of a close cousin to what's happening here. So this is important to realize that that's what's happening. You're getting linear gain for real soft sounds, WDRC, and then it's a bit of linear gain again, and then output limiting compression. This almost looks like some kind of like a giraffe or something when I'm looking at this shape of this picture here. It looks like some weird cartoon of an animal. Anyway, you've seen compression. That's compression. Now it's time to look at expansion. All right, so let's check out expansion because it is the due opposite of compression. And expansion, as we said, is used below the lowest knee point. So let's look at what it is. What's a real complaint of WDRC? We've mentioned one. Okay, here's another complaint of WDRC. In quiet, I hear the fridge too much. I hear too much ambient room noise. I hear a hiss coming from my hearing aids. I hear in dead quiet, I'm hearing the hearing aid working its butt off. Because that's what WDRC does. It amplifies the most in quiet. So internal hearing aid noise, internal mic noise, internal amplifier noise, internal junk of the hearing aid. In other words, it's equivalent input noise. Remember ANSI testing? OSPL 90, reference test gain, full-on gain, harmonic distortion. You even had questions on your midterm on that one. I threw a couple of those puppies on there just to bug you. Anyway, another one was called equivalent input noise, EIN. And remember the tolerance for that? 30 dB. Okay, you've got, so anyway, that kind of internal noise of a hearing aid that the hearing aid is making simply because it's working. Okay, when a hearing aid is working really hard in quiet, because that's what WDRC does, it amplifies the most in quiet, well, it produces its own internal noise. And for a person who has good low frequency hearing, because most people have a sloping hearing loss, right? So if the hearing at 125 and 250 is good, and the person then drops off, that person is going to hear internal hearing aid noise in quiet. And that's what expansion is meant to get rid of. It's meant to get rid of internal, audible hearing aid noise in dead quiet. So let's address good old expansion. Check it out. Let's share the screen. Okay, here's expansion on the left. Now look at its slope. Its slope is even more than linear gain. It's steeper than linear gain. Linear gain is a, excuse me. Oh, I gotta tell you a story. I was at a restaurant this past Friday. And I'm, excuse me, I'm coming off, recovering from a cold. Anyway, and I was sitting across the table. We went to a restaurant called Montana's. And I'm sitting across the table from this really important guy. Think of the president of Missouri Hearing Society. You know, think of sitting across from Lynn Royer. And we're at a meeting. It's Friday, and we're at lunch. And I took a sip of my coffee like this. It went down my windpipe, the wrong tube. What happens when you do that? Went right all over the guy. Over his face, his tie, his shirt. You talk about embarrassed. Like, oh my God. Then I'm walking around with napkins trying to, he's okay, don't worry about it. He's being really nice, but wow. Anyway, there's my story of being a fool. So, things happen. Anyway, I don't know why I got into that story. I forget. Anyway. So, expansion here. Let's check out expansion and see really what it is. So this is compression. Let's look at expansion. Now, note how WDRC is a linear gain, I should say. Okay, this is how WDRC is typically incorporated. You'll have a low knee point, right? Let's say it's something like 40. You'll have linear gain, follow my cursor, the white dotted line, 45-degree angle, linear gain, a knee point, and then a low compression ratio, like 2:1. Typical WDRC. Okay, so I drew WDRC here along the white, but don't get confused at that. This is linear gain. As my input goes up by 20, my output goes up by 20. Okay, 1:1. But the thing to notice is the low knee point and low ratio of compression. Typical, we've studied this 1,000 times. Now, expansion is the gold or yellow line. Look at how steep it is. Okay, now, if you think about that, that's offering greater than linear gain because it's even steeper. If linear gain, let's say if this is a hearing aid offering 40 decibels a gain, look at my corner here, 0 in, 40 out, 20 in, 60 out, 40 in, 80 out. So what's my gain for all those inputs? 40. Okay, simple, nothing new here. And then as my input increased from 40 to 60, my output increased from 80 only to 90, right? So if my input went up by 20, my output went up by 10. 20 to 10 is 2:1. Good, nothing new here. We've covered that. That's all old hat, okay? But look at expansion now. And if we just let the graph tell the story, we'll take a chill pill, okay? I'm going to put that in, take it. Do my Zen Buddhism, okay? Okay, now, let the graph talk to you. With expansion, I continued the gold line all the way through. You'll notice this. I continued it. I made it go all the way down to the bottom. And I did that so that you can see what's happening if you continue the line all the way through. So here goes. 0 in, 0 out. 10 in, 20 out. 20 in, 40 out. Okay, 40 in, 80 out. And now you're in WDRC. So read what it says. Just now look at this. That what this is telling you exactly what I read from the graph. 0 input, 0 output. My gain is 0 right here. 10 input, 20 output. My gain was 10. 10 here, so I'm going to look at my cursor from 10. 10 in was 20 out. My gain was 10. 20 in was 40 out. My gain was 20. 30 in was 60 out. My gain is 30. 40 in is 80 out. Right here. My gain is 40. And now you're into WDRC country. Now we're in WDRC. 50 in, 85 out. 50 in, 85 out. My gain is 35. 60 in, 90 out. My gain is 30. And so on and so on and so on. But what is expansion? A greater than 1:1 compression ratio. And if you're wrapping your head going, I don't really get this, join the club. Just let the graph talk to you. Just let it tell the story. So what's happening here is the greatest gain is at and only at the knee point. For softer inputs, dead quiet, ambient room noise, no, just dead quiet, guess what? I'm getting less and less and less gain. For these, look at my cursor here, for 30 inputs, 20 inputs, 10 inputs, 0 inputs, I'm getting less and less and less gain. So instead of providing strict, straight, linear gain for all of these soft inputs. And then going into compression, it's using expansion to the left of that knee point and then going into compression. And when you're using expansion, don't worry about understanding hows and whys, but if you let the graph tell you, what it's saying to you is you're getting progressively less and less gain for softer and softer inputs below the knee point. That's how expansion addresses the internal noise of the hearing aid in dead quiet. So in dead quiet, when typical linear use below the knee point and then WDRC above the knee point, if this was the case following the white dashed line, you'd be getting maximum gain for really quiet inputs below 40, right? Your most gain is happening. Well, then you're going to hear the internal noise of the hearing aid because it's giving maximum gain. It's working its hardest. And the person with good low frequency hearing is going to say, you know what, in real quiet, this hearing aid's hissing. Get rid of that by the use of expansion. And that's why expansion is used in almost all of today's hearing aids. And a lot of them call it internal noise squelch. Some companies just call it that, internal noise squelch. And if you're looking at that feature on software, it's expansion. That's really what's being used. And for whom does the bell toll? For whom is expansion appropriate? The person with good low frequency hearing. It's not appropriate for a flat hearing loss. Don't use it. It's not necessary. Okay, because that guy isn't going to hear the noise in dead quiet. His hearing isn't as good. But for the person with good low frequency hearing, yep, you betcha. Now, here's another pic. We'll look at exactly the same thing. I'm not even going any further ahead. We're just looking at it again. It's like we're looking at a sculpture, and all we're doing is walking around and looking at it from another angle. Okay, same thing. We're looking at expansion. So on the left, what you see here is WDRC dashed line, and here you'll see the line. I didn't continue it. Unlike this graph here, all I'm showing you is this with my cursor and this. Okay, I'm just showing you the typical, what we usually see. Okay, so here it is. Typical WDRC situation, linear gain for soft inputs, low knee point, low ratio of compression. And when you're using expansion, this is the situation. Okay, now move to the graph on the right. What it's telling you, instead of the vertical axis reading in output, now the vertical axis is reading in gain. And this is telling the same story as the graph on the left. Okay, because look at the left. What's the gain for zero inputs? 40. Why? Because 40 in was, zero in was 40 out. So what was my gain? 40. Okay, zero in, what was my gain? 40. 20 in. If you follow 20 input, here's my output. What was my gain? 20 in, 60 out. What was my gain? 40 again. So my gain for a 20 dB input was 40. And then we'll go to the knee point. 40 in was 80 out. What's my gain? Once again, 40. So what was my gain here at 40? At 40 input, it was 40. So the gain for all inputs below 40 was 40. Okay, and now what's happening with my gain, right graph, for louder inputs? Well, now my gain is going down, of course, because I'm using compression, obviously. So 60 in is going to be, so 60 in here was an output of 90. So now my gain is 30. Okay, 60 in. Yep, my gain was 30. Okay, so this graph on the right is talking in Polish, the graph on the left is talking in German, but they're both saying, how are you doing? Okay, they're both saying the same thing. It's just the language of the vertical axis is different, but it's just telling you that it's telling the story in terms of gain instead of instead of using output as the vertical axis. Now, look at expansion. Expansion is the yellow line. So expansion is telling you the same story as we said here. If you read the writing here, just go over to the graph on the right. What was my gain for a 0 input? Nothing. What was my gain for a 20 input? 20. What was my gain for a 40 dB input? 40. And then what was my gain for a 60 input? 30. And what was my gain for an 80 input? 20. And that's the same thing here. What was your input of 80, output of 100? What was my gain? 20. Okay, so it's just explaining expansion in yet another way. The thing to point out here is that the maximum gain is at and only at the knee point. In other words, the gain almost looks like a diamond. It looks like a hill with a point on it. All right, that's I just think very allegorically like that. But the point is, if you make the knee point nice and low, that means you're getting maximum gain for soft speech. And that's what you want, but you're getting progressively less and less gain for softer sounds. And the reason you're doing that is to get rid of the internal audible hiss of the hearing aid, the internal noise of the hearing aid. So when you think of it, you've got 3 things you can talk about it with digital hearing aids. 2 of them are addressing outside noise. 1 of them's addressing inside noise. Directional microphones, picking up speech more in background noise. Digital noise reduction tries to get rid of background noise in noise. So these 2 are fighting to increase the signal to noise ratio from outside noise. And then the third one, expansion, is being used to get rid of internal hearing aid noise. So it's like a triad, it's like a family, and this is all used in today's digital hearing aids. So we've got lots of features now in digital hearing aids. The first one, lots of channels. Second one, combinations of compression and linear gain being used for slightly louder than average inputs to address the problem. I hear people better at other tables than do the person close up. Another one, directional mics. But they were used in analog hearing aids too. But directional mics came back big time in digital. Another one, digital noise reduction. Another one, feedback reduction. Another one, expansion. So you got these digital features now, things that analog hearing aids couldn't do. Analog hearing aids provided gain and output, great. Analog hearing aids had 2 channels. One at the high end ones did. At the end of the analog era, Bill, Till, they used WDRC. Yep, they did. They used directional mics. Yep, but they didn't have expansion. They didn't have digital noise reduction. They didn't have automatic feedback reduction. So those things especially came out with, and they were all, analog hearing aids were either one type of compression or another type. They didn't combine these types of compression into one hearing aid. So what has digital done? Combines compression, lots of different channels, uses expansion, uses feedback reduction, uses digital noise reduction. These are things that were not used in analog hearing aids. Suffice to say, this largely completes this session. I mean, it's really, if we share screen now, we'll look at what we've got written in our notes. Okay, if I carry on here, benefits of expansion, reduces microphone noise and quiet, addresses typical noise complaint of the K-amp, WDRC, etc. Does this with no extra drain from the battery. Okay, now you're at the end of the total end of the session here. I'm going to go, we'll look at our notes. Okay, yep, perfect, that's good. So let's look at our notes, where we were from 2 weeks ago, scrolling down. You should know that Bernafon, I would put a star by this, you should know that Bernafon Symbio is a type of hearing aid, or Bernafon is a company, as you know, and it produces a channel-free hearing aid. It tries to imitate analog hearing aids by not dividing the sound into channels. It's a channel-free hearing aid. I'll let Bernafon tell you all about that. It just takes a different approach. And you have feedback reduction, And the main way we reduce feedback is by phase cancellation, as it says, letter C. We talked about compression combination in today's digital hearing aids. Okay, and remember dynamic aspects of compression from 3 weeks ago. Dynamic aspects of compression, average detection and syllabic detection. Most digital hearing aids use those two types of dynamic compression characteristics. Most of today's hearing aids use syllabic compression for the low frequency channels. In other words, quick attack release times for the low frequencies, to stop the upward spread of masking, to attack quickly with compression. And then they use, for the higher frequency channels, they use average detection, which means you're getting long attack release times if the signal coming into the hearing aid takes a long time to become loud and then takes a long time to become soft. But if it's a quick door slam, quick attack release times. Okay, so review that, make sure you have a handle on that. And expansion, what we just talked about. Too often it's called internal noise squelch. And actually this is a benefit. It's not really a description of the actual feature, okay? But it's what it does. It's the benefit. And you know, when you're looking at that too, think of those two words, features and benefits, because you're going to run into this all the time in clinic. Features is what the hearing aid is actually doing inside. Benefit is for the end user. Okay? Think about cars. Features and benefits of this brand new Ford or this brand new Toyota or whatever. Oh, it's got a seat warmer for my butt in the winter. Okay? All right, that's a benefit. If the features are more underneath, like how it's doing it. Features and benefits. Features are for you, the clinician. Benefit is for the client. Okay, that's how I look at it. Anyway, expansion is a feature, and calling it internal noise squelch is a benefit. That's what it does for your end user client. Anyway, I would say basically that's itsky pitsky for today. I'm going to just let you now ask me any questions you might have about anything. What's your favorite color? Mine's green.
Mine's teal.
Yours is which?
Teal.
Teal.
Yeah.
Always a complicated one, aren't you? Teal.
Yes, I have teal. Yes, I'm sorry. I have, on a personal note, I put in resumes and I have some feedback from them, from local places, and was wanting your opinion on some of these places, if you have any.
Sure.
Like, I'm not too keen on Miracle Ears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure on them. I think they're very, very much sales oriented, not customer orientated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a thing today from Odd Talent, I think it is.
Odd Talent, heard of it. I don't know much about Odd Talent. I really don't know much about them. Is it a chain?
I guess. I don't know. I dropped off about 7 or 8 resumes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got offered a job at Hearing Life, and I ended up turning it down because all she talked about was sales.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was nothing about customer service, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making sure the client was well taken care of. So.
Now you might not. It's kind of a danger to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you might end up with a Miracle Ear particular outlet that has a really good person working there. Uh-huh. You know, the person's got a really good attitude and a really good way with his or her clients, and you might really. So I find it be careful about generalizing, I would say. Okay. Like Connect is another huge chain all through North America. They're in Canada. They're all over the States too. Connect. Okay. Good old Connect Hearing. Believe it or not, Connect Hearing began in British Columbia, Canada. Gotta love it. It started on the island in Victoria. It was called Island Hearing. Then it spread across Canada, and he sold it to Phonak, and it became Connect. And then they expanded it into the United States. So it's all over. Miracle Ear, Connect, oh gosh, you have we have slightly different chains up here, but chains aren't always bad. Independents are finding it really hard to exist because of Costco.
Yeah.
Costco is, as you know, the big box store, and Costco often can sell retail cheaper than independent people can buy wholesale.
Yeah, I belong to Costco, and I put my resume in there, but
Mm-hmm.
they hire
Yep.
with me, and they don't care if you're trained. They train you there, which is
Yep.
kind of crazy to me. That you don't have
Yeah,
knowledge
it's
of the auditory system. All you do is know how to do a hearing test and
yeah.
fit a hearing aid.
Well, that's why you came to OTC, because you learned about that here by going to school, you know? So you know about that, and that's in your head. And let Costco run the way it wants to. I mean, it may be a good place too. Again, you might be with a really good person there. Every place has, you're going to have good clinicians, and you're going to have good doctors and bad doctors, good nurses and bad nurses. And I guess that's really something that you have to tell in an interview. You get your gut feel of how it is with you and how you click, and give it a chance. But it just, you have to, this field is becoming very, very competitive, and as you know, over-the-counter hearing aids, okay, are now available, and there's goods and bads to that. I'm not all against over-the-counter hearing aids myself. I'm of two minds about them. One way, it's scary, because it's like, wow, what's the use of a clinician if a client can just go on in and buy a hearing aid off the shelf? On the other hand, I wear these, and I got these from a woman in Springfield, Missouri, Sue Exton, an audiologist, some 10 years ago or more. I still wear them all the time. They're reading glasses. They're not a prescription. You know, I got them. I have a bunch of reading glasses. You know, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. And I just go to the dollar store and I bought them. So, you know, if I want good glasses, I'll have to go to an optometrist and get a prescription and blah, 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 blah. But in a way, over-the-counter hearing aids are like reading glasses. They lower the price so a person can get in and buy hearing aids for cheap, and that person can get used to the fact of wearing hearing aids. And after a while, the person will say, you know what, I want to get real hearing aids. I want to get good ones. So in a way, over-the-counter hearing aids are like a shoehorn getting the person into it. And let's face it, the public doesn't know much about our field, and anything we can do to increase public awareness of hearing loss and easy hearing aid cure is good, because it'll grease the way. It makes, I think it's actual, so there's goods and bads to it. It's the only bad thing I find is now over the counter has the same initials as Ozarks Technical Community College.
Oh yeah.
OTC. I figure that's a fitting place to close for today. Yeah. Now, we at OTC, we're really careful when we're at conferences. We no longer call it OTC. We always call it Ozarks.
Ozarks.
Yeah, because there's people right, you know, in the audiences who are, yeah, over the counter. That's becoming a real popular acronym now. So we have to use
drugs, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we at Ozarks are doing this. We used to say we at OTC are. Anyway, okay. I will make sure I'm back into.
Does the International Hearing Instrument Society program, do you know? Is it the international?
IHS?
IHS,
Yeah, they have a 1-year distance ed course.
So, but is that kind of the curriculum that Ozarks uses?
No, we're better than that. We took that and we said that's not good enough. That's why we make a 2-year program.
Okay, because
IHS is okay, but it's not near as good as a 2-year degree.
Okay, because the place that I interviewed at yesterday, they were asking me what program it was the school used, and I'm like,
yep.
Oh,
use our own. We use our own. We looked at IHS and said, IHS isn't a terrible program, but it's not enough. We want students to become technologists, not technicians.
Okay.
Yeah. So we looked at IHS, and we have everything that IHS has, but we have more.
So it's more than IHS.
It is. IHS is a 1-year distance ed. You've got a 2-year active online distance ed. Okay. So I'd say we're better on 2 accounts. One is we're longer and more thorough, and second, we have an actual face-to-face component that IHS simply does not have. It's all booklet, do assignments, send in. Graded, booklet, assignment, send in. There's no interaction at all. So Yeah, it's good. I'm glad you asked that. It's good to know the context, because when you know who you're not, you have a better idea of who you are. And IHS is out there all over the place. Almost every state has clinicians who took IHS. IHS is out of Detroit, Michigan. It's out of a suburb, Livonia, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. And IHS has been around forever. It's been around for like 50 years. And it's international in that it has 95% Americans, a little bit of Canadians, some Japanese, but it's known quite all over the place. But it's not really an accredited college training course. It's they're their own thing, and a lot of states recognize IHS. If you've been a clinician for I think 2 years or 5 years, and you have IHS, you can elect to pay $500 and get what they call your National Board Certification, NBC HIS. You're a hearing instrument specialist, National Board Certified. And that's kind of connected with IHS in a certain way. The executive director of IHS, her name is Kathleen Manillo, and the executive director of NBCHIS is also Kathleen Manillo. Okay, that just happened. But NBCHIS is in a weird way, it's kind of like for somebody who wants to put a shingle on his or her wall. You have to take another exam. You have to take an exam, and it's a rather tough exam, and it kind of indicates a level higher than having just IHS. It's kind of like an extra. To get state certified or licensed, I think you have to pass what's called the ILE, International Licensing Exam. Many states make you pass that, and that exam is made up by IHS.
Okay, so that's what I think they were asking for me when I take the test.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can say it's basically IHS on steroids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you can say that. Yeah. It has everything IHS has, but we offer more and a little bit more reasons why. IHS, you'll never get a discussion on expansion like you just had. Not a chance. Sorry, ain't going to happen. They'll get a little bit on compression, basically. You'll get a little bit on directional mics. You'll never really learn the difference between DB and DBSPL, that you can add things together and when you can't. They don't talk. They just, I'm sorry. But NBCHIS is meant to be for someone who's taken the ILE, they've practiced, they took the 1-year course, IHS course. They've practiced for, I believe it's at least 2 years, but maybe it's 5. I can't remember. And then they can elect to take the NBCHIS, which is also out of IHS. I mean, this is all, IHS is like a spider. It's all over the place.
Well, I have a feeling that the gal, I'm going to shadow a fitter tomorrow. She's the head honcho of there's 3 offices out here as part of the division. They're part of Audigy, I think it is.
Audigy, yeah. Check it out. Yeah.
I think we were just bought by Audigy or something.
Okay, I've heard of Audigy before. Yeah.
And so
Audigy is a buying group. Audigy, yeah. Let me tell you about Audigy because of Costco. Okay, because see, Costco is such a big buyer. And when you're a huge buyer of hearing aids, you get a cheaper wholesale price.
Yeah, I was surprised how cheap they sell those things.
Well, yeah, it's because Costco can go to Phonak, and Costco can go to Unitron and go to all these manufacturers and say, hey, we'll buy your product so we can turn around and sell it. We'll buy 1 million of your hearing aids. So, of course, they get a better deal. If I buy a gallon of milk, I'm going to get a better deal than if I buy 4 quarts, right? Obviously. So when you buy more, you get a better deal. And that's why Costco can turn around and sell its hearing aids for cheaper, because they bought them wholesale from the manufacturer. But then that manufacturer will turn to you. You're a private person running your own office, and they'll say, yeah, but see, you're better than Costco. See, you're not a big box store. You're offering counseling. That's why people pay more for your hearing aids. Okay, that's why we charge you more for your hearing aids. Well, yeah, you're not as big of a buyer as Costco. So sometimes the manufacturers, when they sit down to eat, they have 2 plates, one for each face. Okay, one face for Costco and another face for you. But the biggest, so Audigy is a group of people that said, hey, let's buy hearing aids en masse. Let's buy a whole bunch of hearing aids. So that they're a bigger buying group, they get a better wholesale price. So people who are clinicians, who are members of Audigy, are working together to form a bigger buying group so as to get a better wholesale price. That's essentially how that all works. So check it out. I wish you luck in it. I think we now are at our 1 hour time. I'm glad we discussed and talked about this stuff. Anybody tuning into this recorded session will hear the same. Hopefully I won't get in trouble from talking too many things. We're all good. We're all good. See you next time. All right. All right. I'll stop recording here. Cheers.